Agreed?
Okay.
Okay, and Jay will join us hopefully in a minute. So our agenda is, first we'll do introductions, establish a quorum. Second, we'll take a look at the minutes and take a vote to approve the minutes. Third, we'll do a quick update on our outreach to get meetings with the appointing authorities. Fourth, we'll look at the draft legislation. The commission had given us a sense of direction in the previous meeting. Take any final input, take a vote to move forward on that. Fifth, we'll look at the strategy for advancing the amendment, look for a motion and a vote on that. Any additional public commentary, we'll do a plan and how we're going to get to the finish line, including the next meeting, and then a motion to adjourn. Sound okay? And we'll run this meeting similar to the previous calls. Thanks to Jeff for providing all the infrastructure and hosting capability. The commissioners have full audio and video privileges. And when we get to other topics, we want to invite in the public. We'll ask people to identify their interest through the chat window or the question window. We'll recognize you and allow the public to have the audio and video privileges as appropriate to the agenda item. So it'll be a combination of just commissioners and public as well. So in the interest of time, why don't we move right ahead? Any objection? Hearing none. Let's do introductions in the quorum. This is Bill Kilmartin from Newburyport. Jeff?
Jeff Clements from Cambridge.
Dominic?
Dominic from Salem.
Bopa?
Dominic Vangelis.
Bopa Malone from Bedford.
Carmen?
Carmen Chantal from Sudbury.
Novell?
Noble Alexander, Framingham.
Cheryl?
Cheryl Clyburn Crawford, Boston.
Thank you. We have a quorum. Let us proceed to the next topic, which is review and approval of the minutes. Jeff had been sent out the minutes. Do you want to share your screen, Jeff?
I will, and while I'm setting it up, I'll correct the record that Greg Blonder deserves all the thanks and credit, and Boston University for these logistics, which I had nothing to do with, but he did. So thank you, Greg, and BU.
Here, here. As Jeff is bringing up the document, so we all have a visual on that. Do I have a motion to go forward with the minutes?
Move to accept the minutes.
Second?
Second.
Okay. As soon as we see the minutes, we'll go for discussion, then a vote.
Okay, you should be able to see them. Do you see them?
Yep. You want to scroll through?
And these have been circulated by email to the commission as well. And they're available on in the Google Drive that the public has access to now. Okay.
So we have a motion and it's been seconded. Any discussion about the minutes? Commissioners have any comments or questions about the minutes? Hearing none, ready for a vote. Bill Kilmartin votes to approve, yes. Jeff?
Yes.
Dominic?
Yes.
Bopa?
Yes.
Carmen?
Yes.
Novell?
Yes.
Cheryl?
Yay.
Thank you very much. The minutes have been accepted and approved. Let's next move to the third agenda item, which is an update on our request to have meetings with the 5 appointing authorities. So I'll start off quickly. We did have a meeting with representatives of the governor's office. As we indicated, they seemed very receptive and interested and enthusiastic, or I should say appreciative of the work that we have done, and promised to take it to the governor and invited us to come back to them later in the month of January to get his personal reaction. We've requested and have a time set up for Senate President Spilka. And I want to, that's on June 23, I believe 2:30 in the afternoon. And a couple of folks have already indicated interest to attend that meeting. Are there other commissioners that want to attend that meeting with Senator President Spilka?
Yes. Yeah. I definitely would.
Novell, Brett? Bill and Jeff are already on. Carmen, I think you're on. Yeah.
Tommy, again,
Hey guys, Jay here.
Hey Jay, welcome to the call.
Sorry.
We're
I would like to
talking-
be added.
That sorry about that. I thought so long story short, my wife's a COVID nurse and had a random night off tonight, so it was dinner for two. So dinner's over. So here we are. I'm sorry about that.
Good for her. Thanks for joining us. Jay, are you joining the meeting with Senator Spilker on June 23?
I'm hoping to. If you're still inviting me, absolutely yes.
Yep. Anybody else?
Is that via Zoom?
Yes. Yep.
What time is that meeting?
2:30 in the
2:30.
afternoon.
I would like to attend.
Okay. Okay, I'll send
think-
that one. Go ahead.
I might be able to as well. Can I say yes for now? And if I can't, can I email you?
Yep, and I'll circulate another note on this, prior to the event. So for any, last minute additions or deletions. So we have a good representation on that call. The Attorney General has indicated a possibility of having a meeting with us later this week on June 18th at, I believe, 2 in the afternoon. Jeff, do you want to give us an update on that?
That is the update, and I think we will be able to confirm that soon.
Which commissioners would like to? So Bill and Jeff and Costas have already indicated interest in doing that. What other commissioners would like to attend the Attorney General's call?
What day is that?
Thursday.
2
Thursday. What time is it again?
2 p.m.
2 p.m.
Yeah, I'd be happy to.
Bill, I'd like to join that meeting.
Mm-hmm.
I would too, Bill.
Yep.
I
and
can
Bev?
too. I can too.
Okay, Bopa. Others?
What time on Thursday again, Bill? I'm sorry.
2.
2.
2. I cannot make it. Sorry.
Well, we have good representation for the Attorney General, and we'll send out another note to folks tomorrow to confirm who's attending. And we create a deck for these meetings, so we'll all be following a PowerPoint, deck, and we'll confirm who's attending. The Attorney General later this week, Senate President Spilka next week. Then, in regards to the Secretary of State, his representative, his legislative assistant, has indicated a willingness to take our meeting, but hasn't confirmed a date with me yet. So as soon as I get further information from him, I'll circulate that back to the commissioners, and again, ask who wants to, once I get a date on the calendar, I'll ask who wants to join the Secretary of State meeting. And we haven't, and fifthly, we have not yet heard back from Speaker DeLeo. Is there anybody that could actually try to incentivize the speaker to get back to us?
So who was his appointees?
That would be me and Dominic. And,
I am, yeah.
Let's see, who's our other?
Well, I mean, Carmen, Dominic, if you guys can, work some magic to get us a
Yeah,
time in the calendar, that'd be helpful.
I'll reach out to people in his
Yeah.
office tomorrow again.
Awesome.
I'm happy to do what I can.
Excellent. Excellent. So I think those meetings are appropriate and important. And so we're trying our hardest to, get some time. We understand that people are busy and there's the virus and there's the, all sorts of other issues going on. So, but we shall persevere. Are we ready to move on? Any further, commissioners have any questions about that process to get these meetings? Okay, so hearing none, let's move to the next topic. We're looking for a vote from the commission to be comfortable with the draft legislation that we talked about on the previous call. And Jeff, are you in a position to show the side-by-side draft legislation? We had a healthy discussion and debate on this. It was the sense of the commissioners that we should go forward, but because it's so important, we wanted to, let it rest for a week, let folks marinate on it a bit more, and then bring it up for a motion and a vote on this call. So as Jeff is teeing up that document, do I have a motion to go forward in the matter of the draft legislation?
Motion.
Thank
So
you.
moved.
Second,
Do I have a second?
second, this is Dominic. Second,
Thank you, Dominic. So let's now have discussion. So you've seen this before. And we had, like I said, we had a healthy discussion, and I believe we made some on-the-fly changes. Jeff, check my memory in this matter, please. You know, it based through the discussion and the public commentary. And so what you see in front of you is the current iteration of the draft legislation that Carmen would be in a position to file on behalf of the commission. So in discussion, do commissioners have any further comments or questions about this draft legislation? Okay, hearing no comments and questions, let us allow the public to weigh in on this matter again. We had some input from the public on this topic in the previous call. Because let's allow them again. So, Greg, let me turn to you now. Has anybody in the public indicated an interest to weigh in on this topic? Greg, do we have people in the chat room that want to talk about this?
Hello? Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah, is
Yes.
that you, Sam? Okay.
Yes,
So
that's
we
me.
recognize Sam Feldman. Go ahead.
And Greg, you are muted, so we didn't hear you if you were talking.
Hi, so I have 3 changes that I would recommend. I'm going to post them in the chat. The first I would add to the preamble, just because the preamble is the political language and a lot of my concerns are political, so you need to have that in the preamble, not just in the text. So I would add, whereas the Citizens Commission recommended redundancy and effort means no more, wait, is this what I wrote? Whereas the Citizens Commission recommended redundancy and effort means more chances of movement through the ultimate, oh, right. This is a quote from your report. So I'm quoting from your report in how you, what you said your recommendations are. Just putting the word whereas in front. Whereas the Citizens Commission recommended redundancy and effort means more chances at the movement towards the ultimate objective. Specifically, Massachusetts should support and find ways to 1, work through Congress, 2, support a limited purpose Article 5 convention, and 3, invest in building a further groundswell of support across the nation. And then the last clause of the preamble I would add just at the end, are ratified by furthering strategies already determined. And then in small change in what was paragraph 4A5 and is now paragraph 4A2, I would add the word further in front of that paragraph. And at the end of that paragraph, I would add the words in accordance with the extant published reports of this commission. Those are the changes I would recommend. And I do also want to point out that I do find it concerning if you're meeting with legislators, I would really want to make sure that you're stressing the convention bill that's before Congress that you've endorsed. I was glad to see you mentioning pushing those bills by their specific bill number in your PowerPoint, but I just want to make sure I'm emphasizing that, you know, they need your help to get that up for a vote. So
Yep,
I want to
agreed. Okay.
that too.
Thank you, Sam. Commissioners have any questions or comments on the 3 suggestions Sam just made?
Yeah, Mr. Chair.
Jeff.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate Sam's usual thoughtful contribution. I tend to would not favor the preamble language. Much as I like our report and quoting it, I think the strategy that we were trying to do with this approach on the legislation is build off the authority that we have from the people and the law. And so most of the preamble is quoting from the law itself, not from our own authority created by the report. And there's a lot in the report that once we start doing whereases on specific things, So I would tend to, I would defer to Carmen's judgment on this question of whether the whereases are helpful or not helpful. But that's my immediate reaction to try to not add too much into the preamble.
Thank you, Jeff. Carmen, would you have an opinion on the suggestion to add a couple more whereas clauses?
Yeah, I think we're better off without them. I think for the reasons that Jeff articulated.
Okay.
And my concern is just that it's, like you said, the deleting of those other paragraphs below, I think is good, with the exception of that last paragraph that you did not delete, which I recommended a couple of changes to. And I put all these changes in chat just now. But it's only one additional paragraph in the whereas and a couple of words on top of one of the paragraphs in the preamble, just to establish the work you've already done, and this is now moving forward from that, which is in line with deleting those paragraphs from your current version. It's just putting it into the preamble makes it harder for the political opposition to misuse that.
Yeah, and I would just point out, whereas the Citizen Commission completed the report required by Section 4 of Chapter 322 is already there.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's good as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam.
Okay, other
Line
commissioners have questions or comments about the whereas clauses? Well, this is Bill, so I'll weigh in. I don't have any problem adding a couple more clauses if we feel that it adds value. If and the ones that Sam suggested, like I said, I could be fine with that. But if we feel that we've already covered the bases and it doesn't really, add much value, then I would keep it as it is.
You could also add to that one that Jeff said, where the Citizens Commission completed the report, concluding that, and then quote your conclusion. That might be a good compromise between those two options.
Yep. Other commissioners have comments or questions on this topic?
Bill, that might be the lawyer in me, but I'm a fan, obviously, of brevity. Let's get right to the point. Let's stick with the issue. I think
that doesn't sound like the lawyer in me.
I think when it comes to this issue, there's plenty of reading to be done. I don't think we need to add to it, but I understand the idea, but I think I would try to stick with what we have. That's all. That's my only
not add more. Okay.
No, correct.
Thank you, Jay. Well, let's and could we go down, Jeff, to the other suggestion that Sam made? It was in section 4A. Is that correct?
Yeah, what was 4A5 and is now going to become 4A2. The concern there, if it's unchanged, then it's essentially looking at making your recommendations anew, which would imply that the new commission can just change what you've recommended entirely, rather than taking your work and further making recommendations in order to implement what you've already done.
Do commissioners have any questions or comments for Sam on this particular suggestion?
I have a comment just to form a baseline. Hopefully, we're all in agreement on what the existing. Sam, you're referring to line 98, correct? Section 5. Yeah. I share your goal. First, our work is done. The next phase is why we need the commission to not revisit the work, but to promote it. However, I read Section 5 as already saying that, and unduly messing with it won't be necessary. The reason is I think the recommendations taken by these bodies to further promote, propose, and ratify the recommended constitutional amendment or amendments. I think the reason in the drafting, anyway, and I'm happy to be corrected if my assumption is wrong, but the reason, frankly, I thought it was sort of elegant to leave that to Jay's brevity point, which I agree with, is that it's sort of locked in already, the recommended constitutional amendment or amendment. So that recommendation is done. What this section is saying, okay, now it's time to promote it, and the proposal refers to Congress. Propose or a convention, but propose the amendment and then have it ratified by the state. So it's not intended to leave a door open to kind of starting again.
Well, this paragraph was what you used as the basis for the recommendations on the methods that you've already established. So leaving it there would allow someone to revisit the things that, leaving it unchanged would allow someone to revisit the recommendations that you made on the basis of that paragraph. If you say only to further beyond what you've already done, then it would not allow someone to go back and revisit what you've done. It would allow them to make new recommendations in light of what has already been done.
Yeah, and it may well be that more recommendations are both needed and welcome. The recommended constitutional amendments is already a done deal. So it's not an invitation to like, oh, let's just throw that out and start again. But it is, you know, we don't know what the lay of the land is going to be in a year or 2 or 3. And if there are additional recommendations that we haven't thought of or other things that might help move it forward, I don't think, at least for me, my view is I don't want to lock in as if we've carved in stone the only things that make sense for promoting the amendment and advancing the amendment. I would want to have, and I would think any commissioner who wanted to join this commission would want to have an ability to be creative and develop all kinds of anything that help promote it and advance it that we may not have had time to think about. That's my perspective anyway, and I'll stop there.
Well, I'm not married to my wording, but I think that what this says does not say what you just said. It allows for that as one possibility, but it also allows for revisiting what you've already done. You can, maybe my wording isn't the best, but maybe like the word you said was additional. You could put the word additional in there instead of further, and you maybe change the words that I put on the end instead of in accordance with the extant published reports, or change that to in accordance with and extending beyond, something to that effect. Or even if you just put additional and take off the end of what I put, but additional recommendations for actions to be taken by Congress, or further recommendations for actions to be taken by Congress, even without that end, I think allows the reading that you just stated. But without an additional word by there, it basically means we're going to look at these, we're going to look at all the recommendations anew and redo that work.
Yeah, I hear you. That might make sense. I'll stop there and let other commissioners talk.
Other commissioners have questions or comments for Sam in regards to this particular suggestion? Well, this is Bill, so I'll weigh in. I do contemplate and I do hope that the successor commission, I'll just give it that name, when they're engaged in conversation and coordination with similar groups in other states, that things will evolve and coalesce around a common ground that leads to ratification of the amendments. And so while we're putting a stake in the ground and writing reports and have specific recommendations that are actionable and give something to which people can react, I would imagine and I would hope that as the process goes forward with other states, that there's some room for further evolution and not backtracking or not just rehashing old ground, but just finding the common ground that can get 38 states to ratify. So I don't think this is locked in stone, is my point.
It sounds like what you're talking about is the wording, which is not the subject of this subparagraph. This is the subparagraph that deals with the actions to be taken in order to get the wording in place. So this is going through Congress, going through the convention and the Citizens Commission, where the recommendations you made that you made because this paragraph authorized you to make them. So I don't see how that's just the word, that's just what the law is. And if you want to make further recommendations for strategies like direct action or whatever else ends up making sense in the subsequent commission, that's fine. But I don't see a need to allow I see a reason to allow revisiting of the language. I don't see, as you talk to other states, I don't see a reason to allow revisiting of the strategies that you've already decided upon.
Okay. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Maybe it's other commissioners have comments or questions? Okay, so hearing that, I think we should move on. Do we have others in the waiting room, Greg?
We have two more. One is under the name Agile New England.
Okay, Agile, would you please introduce yourself? And you're on.
Yeah, I'm David Rosenberg. Sorry for using the wrong account.
Hey, David, didn't recognize the Agile name.
Yeah, I didn't mean to use it. At any rate, my point is that this commission changed its quorum from being 8 to 7. That has not been challenged, so you guys are good. But I'm not aware of any statute or regulation that actually permits that. There's an FAQ from the Division of Open Government that reads, the question is, what is a quorum of a public body? The answer is that the open meeting law defines a quorum as a simple majority of the members of a public body unless otherwise provided in a general or special law, executive order, or other authorizing provision. So I think that it would really be hard to defend a body changing its own quorum rule. And therefore, I'd like to suggest that in your proposed amendments, if you want the successor commission to be able to change its quorum, or if you want it to have a different quorum than a simple majority, you should address that in the amendment.
Yeah, you had made this suggestion in the previous call. There's a section in Chapter 322 that talks about the open meeting requirements. Jeff, can you scroll up and find us that section? Yeah, there it is there. And so if I understand you correctly, what you're suggesting is that we amend this section and say, and provided further, the commission shall be allowed to establish its own rules for a quorum.
If that's what you want, or if you think it's fine to have it be a simple majority, leave it alone.
Okay, we understand the suggestion. Any questions or comments from the commissioners? Okay, so I'll go here. I tell you, I don't have any problem with tacking on an extra phrase, and so it would be section 3I is amended by inserting into the existing language after the word commission the phrase, and provided further the commission shall establish its own rules for a quorum.
Sounds good to me.
Say it again, Bill.
The phrase, the commission shall establish its own rules.
Yeah,
it's amended by inserting the following language, quote, by inserting into the existing language, and you can say the following, quote, the commission shall establish its rules for a quorum, end quote. Do other commissioners have a reaction to this amendment to the draft legislation?
If we're going to be amending the meeting thing, perhaps we want to anticipate the the end of the current emergency, and also decide that we can also meet by Zoom or other electronic meetings, so that the public has full and easy access to the work of the commission, and kind of write into the law that, as we've gotten, as many have observed, much more participation since we've been going on Zoom than we did as people had to travel distances to be here.
So let's just stay right where you have the cursor right now. The commission shall establish its rules for a quorum and virtual meetings. Would that do it? And the whole intent here is to, remove the avoidance of doubt about, continuing to do what we have been doing. As long as we don't open up a can of worms that's going to cause the whole thing to get shot down, I don't mind tacking it on. What do other commissioners think?
But do you add your kitchen sink language that says, pursuant to any changes to the laws of the Commonwealth of Mass, blah, blah, blah? Does that cover it? So you be a little bit more flexible, make it more of a formula as opposed to just what we want?
Yeah, I think, Jay, the only thing I hope the laws of the Commonwealth will relax the open meeting laws so that we could have these kind of meetings. But if it doesn't happen,
well, they do have an existing virtual meeting law that requires the body to adopt that ability. So, when I was on the Board of Selectmen, we didn't adopt it, but you could have adopted it. So it might need a little bit more research, if you will, but there's something there already. And then to your point, we hope that this gets better after all of this. But again, pandemic, good opportunity.
So I think what I heard you say, Jay, was adding the phrase where the cursor is now, pursuant to existing special and general law. Period.
Yeah. Because then we don't have to. I mean, to Jeff's point, if they make a change, we don't have to worry that somebody down the road says your law was very specific to you guys. It wasn't specific to what's going on in Massachusetts. Massachusetts law says this, and you guys can't do what you want to do. So whether it's pursuant to this body or pursuant to whatever authority is allowed under the Mass General laws, and then that way we kind of cover ourselves on both sides.
The remote participation regulation issued by the AG basically says that a quorum of the public body has to be together, and it has to be chaired by a person who is at the physical location where the quorum is. So I think what the governor's executive order basically suspended a lot of that. But if the executive order is rescinded, you're back to basically where you were before the executive order was issued.
Okay, so what do the commissioners think? And we don't want to get distracted on this issue because we have other topics that we need to get to tonight. I mean, are you good with are the commissioners good with what you see in front of you, or what's your view?
And I was going to suggest, like, when we do vote on this, that we authorize the co-chairs and Carmine to make, such changes consistent with the spirit of what we're trying to do as deemed appropriate. Because you're going to get the House Counsel to, change language to make it, conform to the style of the House, and there'll be other issues that are going to pop up. And I think we need to just authorize you guys to take it from here. Greg Scott McDermott is in the waiting room. If you could let him in.
Sure will.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Let's move on. Who's next, Greg?
Next is Paul Lansing.
How many more do we have?
Paul is last.
Okay, Paul. We recognize Paul.
Thank you, Bill.
Paul, you cut out.
See, you should be okay now.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I hear you. Jeff, could you scroll to the top, please? The very first sentence. An act to continue the Citizens Commission concerning a constitutional amendment to secure government of the people. I would suggest the word of be changed to by and for the people.
Okay. The commissioners, thank you. Any of the commissioners have any questions or comments for Paul?
Just noting that current language is the current language of the law, government of the people. So
I just copied it over from the chapter 322, right?
Yeah, I think we want to stay with the original.
Okay. Any other questions or comments by the commissioners? Okay, so we've had the people in the waiting room. So the motion has been made, seconded, and discussed that we go with the draft that you see in front of you here in column C, and that Common be authorized to work with the other commissioners to go forward, file a bill, work with House Counsel, engage the legislative process, and try to get this done. Are we ready for a vote?
Yes.
Okay, hearing no objection. Bill votes yes. Jeff?
Yes.
Dominic,
Yes.
Opa,
Yes.
Carmen,
Yes.
Novell,
Yes.
Cheryl,
Yes.
Jay,
Yes.
Scott.
Yes.
Thank you. The motion has been approved. Next, we're going to turn to the next topic on the agenda, which is a motion and a vote on the proposed strategy for advancing the amendment. So this is the PowerPoint document that we've seen before. We've looked at this a couple of times. Jeff, are you in a position to share that PowerPoint document?
Do you want to do it, Bill? I can, but you're going to be navigating it, so it might be easier if you are. I think it's all panelists can share, so you should be in good shape. But let me know. I'm happy to do it if need be.
Let me see if I can find it.
I can pull it up, Bill, if it's easier.
Yeah. Why don't you do that? Because
okay. Let me just set up.
So folks have seen this before. It's the PowerPoint. It includes the context, a high-level summary of the strategy, and then a more detailed set of proposed activities stratified into short-term, medium-term, and long-term. So as Jeff is queuing up that document, do I have a motion to go forward with the proposed strategy on advancing the amendment? Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second.
Okay. So now we'll have a discussion.
Okay.
So we've seen this before. We'll flip through this really quick. You want to go to the next slide? This just talks about, specifically addressing the requirements in Chapter 322, Section 5. Slide 3. And we talked about 2 amendments, and we've already approved this language for amendment, what we're calling amendment number 1. Next slide, please. And we've already approved this language for what we're calling amendment number 2. Next slide. This is hearkening back to the guiding principles that were in the December 31st report. Next slide. This is the strategy on a single page. It is to say multi-dimensional, and the details follow. It's driven by the citizens and nonpartisan. It's to keep the options open and adjust as the process unfolds. And it's stratified into the near-term, mid-term, and long-term categories. You go to the next slide. So these are the details in terms of engaging political leadership, a series of activities. We're already working on conducting a meeting. We need to write this letter to support House Bill 3208, Senate 2163. We just worked on drafting, and Carmen's going to file the legislation. So we're already working on, this strategy. If there is a successor commission, obviously we do transition, meet with the congressional delegation for the U.S. Congress, try to meet with the Republican Democrat National Committee, and send correspondence to the candidates for president. So that's all, related to the engaging political leadership portion of the multi-dimensional strategy. Next slide. More details on the next slide, please.
Sorry, bear with me.
And engaging other states, a aspect of the strategy which I personally feel is extremely important. Try to get a letter and a copy of our reports to the 50 governors, 50 secretaries of state, 50 attorneys general, 50 House speakers, 50 Senate presidents, seeking their feedback and support and bringing to their attention what we've done in Massachusetts. Now, there is a National Governors Association, so there is a mailing list for the 50 governors. There is a National Association of Secretaries of State, so there's a mailing list for the Secretaries of State. You want to go to slide 8, Jeff? There's likewise a National Association of Attorney General, and there's a group of House speakers and Senate presidents. And so these mailing lists exist. It would be really cool if you get our appointing authorities to actually sign and send the letters on our behalf, but we'll see. And then that tees up the next item that you see here, which is to get a list of other entities similarly situated and get into a cadence of routine and recurring communication and coordination. So we can talk about our report, their reports, find the common ground, and move forward. And then the third dimension in this multi-dimensional strategy is engaging the public writ large. And you see activities here related to the website, social media, more outreach, media outreach, perhaps celebrity outreach, a national day of reflection, and perhaps culminating, if we pull it off, to this concept of a citizens Congress that we've talked about before. So this, we have a motion and it's been seconded and it's a discussion. Do the commissioners have further questions or comments about the proposed strategy to advance the amendments? Okay, hearing none. Do we have people in the waiting room, Greg, from the public that want to weigh in on this matter?
We have one person, Sam Fieldman.
Okay, we recognize Sam.
Oh, we have two now.
Hi, on this one, I'm real quick. Just two small suggestions. The more important of them is on slide 6, where it says, ask Congress to form an amendment proposing convention. It should read, ask the states to call for an amendment proposing convention. You guys aren't authorized to ask Congress for that. You can ask Congress to propose an amendment directly, but only the states can ask for a convention. I put that in the chat. And the next slide, this one's more minor point. I think what you have there more or less covers it, but I would prefer to see the second point on slide 7, adding the words and substantially similar resolutions if necessary, and subsequent substantially similar resolutions if necessary. I also wish there had been a motion to add the word additional like we discussed in the previous point. I was surprised nobody made that motion, but that's all I had on this one.
Okay, thank you. Do commissioners have comments or questions for Sam?
Yes, Mr. Chair. I was just wondering why, what's the difference between those words or the language with that? I just want to ask Sam.
Sure. So it says now that you're asking Congress to form an amendment proposing convention. Article 5, Congress can't propose an Article 5 amendment proposing convention unless they get the application by 2/3 of the states. So you guys asking them literally means nothing. Only the states can ask them. What in pushing the Article 5 convention strategy, as you guys have done, the way to do that is to ask the states to call for the convention. The states then apply to Congress, and once 34 states have applied to Congress, then Congress must propose it.
And the second point you were making about slide number
7. Oh, if the current legislation, you named specific bill numbers, which I think is great, but if those don't pass, there's going to be new bill numbers in the next legislative session. I think having your specifically mentioning these bill numbers does the job pretty well. I just think it would do it slightly better if you point out that it's a furthering recommendation or continuing recommendation. But I don't think that's as important as just the accuracy in the previous slide. Your intention was clearly correct, just the accuracy was slightly mistaken.
Thank you. Other commissioners have comments or questions for Sam?
I just have one quick comment, and that's that I hear Sam's point. I think, Bill, a lot of this you've worded to try to be accessible and not overly legal. And I think the strategy, just to, at least as I've understood it, when we're saying the strategy ask Congress or the strategy do this, we mean the state should do that, and the commission should keep pushing them to do it. So it's not just and this gets to a kind of earlier discussion, we don't want our elected officials or anyone else to say, oh, that's the commission's job, get back to us when it's ratified. These are recommendations that the commission is telling state officials who have power and authority to do so to get on it. So I had read what Bill had written here, ask Congress to form an amendment proposing convention to refer to Massachusetts should ask Congress to, i.e. exactly in conformance with Article 5, as you're saying. So I don't have a problem with it. I just think the clarity and elegance of the language should, Bill's sort of plain spoken, plain English approach has benefit.
I have no problem with it on that reading. And like I said, it's a minor point either way, but on that reading, that makes sense.
Yeah, that was the intent. Other commissioners have questions or comments on this? Okay, hearing none. Do we have others in the waiting room, Greg?
We have 2 more in the waiting room. The next one is Steve Gagg.
Can we recognize Steve?
It's not Steve Gagg, it's Laura Gang.
I was going to say that, Laura. I was going to say, I bet that's actually Laura, but anyway, go ahead. We recognize Laura.
Change it when I'm in this position. I should just ask Greg to change it. This one I hope is simple. On slide 6 again, where you have a bullet that says suggest 2 amendments and adjust to a single amendment if warranted. I would suggest you write a single comma combined amendment if warranted, because you don't want to lose one of those amendments. You want what I think you're saying is that you either want to get these points across in 2 amendments or you want to get them across in 1.
Thank you. Other commissioners have questions or comments for Laura?
Can I get a decision on that or a clarification?
Well,
is it that you're saying that you would jettison one of the amendments in favor of the other?
No, that's not the intent. And actually, I wrote this in very plain English intentionally because the 2 amendments were introduced into the deck previously. So I think by the time the reader gets to this slide, they understand that it would be combining 2 amendments into 1 amendment. If
and maybe
warranted.
Replace single with combined.
Yeah, okay. Well, the intent here is actually to keep the options open and adjust as the process unfolds. That's really the superior point. It's not to, lock in such a manner that flexibility is constrained. That relates to dealing with the other states, finding the common ground. Other commissioners have comments or questions to Laura on this? Okay, hearing none, let's go to the next one. Who's next, Greg?
There's no one else in the queue.
Okay. Any further discussion by the commissioners about the proposed strategy? Does anybody want to make any changes? Are you good to go with that? Are you ready for a vote? Okay, that was 3 questions. I'll take the last question. Are you ready for a vote?
Yes.
Ready for a vote.
Hearing no objection. So we have a motion that's been seconded to accept the strategy that you see on the PowerPoint. Bill votes yes. Jeff?
Yes.
Dominic? Dominic, you're on mute. Yeah, thank you. Wopa?
Yes.
Carmen?
Yes.
Naval?
Oops, sorry, I didn't unmute. I vote yes.
Thank you. Cheryl?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Scott?
Yes.
Excellent. So motion has been voted and accepted. So the next agenda item is there additional testimony from the public, either invited or ad hoc, that we want to entertain at this time? So let's just see if there's anybody in the waiting room. Is there any other matter before we move to the topic after this, which is the plan to get to the finish line? So is there any additional public testimony? To my knowledge, there's no other invited testimony or ad hoc testimony. Do you see anything else there in the waiting room, Greg?
No, there's no one at the moment.
Okay. So here.
Wait a second. David Rosenberg just raised his hand.
Okay, we'll recognize David.
Hold on, I just made a mistake. Here we go, allowed to talk. Okay, David.
Okay, thank you. So this is really a question to the commissioners, and the question is, for the meetings that you have with the appointing authorities, do you plan to allow the public to at least monitor, though perhaps not speak, at those meetings you have with the appointing authorities?
Okay, thank you for that question, David. The answer is sorry, but no. It's between the commissioners and the appointing authorities. It's not a public meeting.
So the issue then is that if you had a quorum of commissioners present, you couldn't have that meeting as a private meeting.
Any question? Any of the commissioners have questions or comments for David? Okay, thank you. Let's move on. Thanks, David. So I want to go to the next topic, which is the plan to get to the finish line. In a couple things here. I'm going to suggest that we have a working group that take a crack at putting together a draft of the report with the notion of having this draft available for the commission's review somewhere around and about June 30th. So two parts. Part one is, what would you think about a subset of people going into a working group and starting to put pen to paper to write a second report with the expectation that we have a document, a draft, towards the end of June. And point two is then have another commission meeting where people will have had a chance to read that report, and then we could have a discussion and a vote to accept the report and be in a position to send it by June 30th or shortly thereafter. What do folks think about that suggestion? A working group and then another commission meeting.
Good idea.
I think that's a good idea. Just to get kind of some coalescing behind the final push. So,
other commissioners?
How many are you looking at for this working group, Bill?
Well, so let me ask the question, who wants to be on the working group? So I'm going to volunteer. I've actually already created an outline that we could use as a starting point. Are there others that want to volunteer to be on this working group to draft the next report?
I'll volunteer.
Thank you, Carmen. I'm looking for more volunteers.
I'll hitch along with you, Carmen.
Right.
I volunteer Costas.
Yeah, I do too.
I don't teach him not to show.
Well, he had already indicated interest.
I'm just teasing. I have a really, really, really challenging 2 weeks, so I can't volunteer to put a real oar in the water, but happy to weigh in and be consulted as time permits and allowed, but I don't want to hold it up. And I suspect Matt and maybe some of the others who aren't here would probably do the same. So if you don't mind, pencil me in for reinforcement as needed, but not very flexible with scheduling or time.
So what would folks think about, it's Bill, Carmen, Novell, Costas, this working group, and others, might join, but we'll start drafting content. Maybe this working group would get together, probably like a week from today, like the 23rd, with the notion that we would have a draft, send it to the commission, maybe on Thursday, the 25th. And what would you think about another commission meeting on Tuesday, June 30th?
I'm unavailable that evening.
How about Monday, June 29th?
That's better for me.
Sure.
I can do either.
Yeah, so let me put this out there as in terms of a motion. So the chair is going to exercise his prerogative to make a motion that we have a working group do a draft of the second report, and that we send this to the commission in advance of the meeting on June 29. The objective of that meeting would be to focus on the second report. Do I have a second to that motion?
Second.
Any further discussion? Okay, so I don't know if we need a vote. I guess we do. So Bill votes yes. Jeff?
Yes.
Dominic? Dominic's getting off mute. Bopa?
Aye.
Carmen?
Yes.
Naval?
Yes.
Cheryl?
Yay.
Jay?
Yes.
Scott?
Yes.
Okay, so that'll be our game plan. I'll be reaching out to members of the working group, and also, copy the other commissioners if you decide that you have availability and you want to join. And we'll start driving towards a text that we can get in front of everybody with sufficient time for your review and thoughtful input, with the objective of having a meeting on June 29th, where perhaps we could finalize such a report.
Dominic, did you have your hand up?
I think I entered something wrong on the keypad here. I was voting yes on that. Sorry.
Oh, okay. That was the hand. It was a hand saying yes. Okay.
So we have a plan on how to get to the June 30th finish line, or I should say June 29th finish line. And then, once we get there, we could talk about the distribution of the report. And by then, we'll have other information coming in from these appointing authority meetings and any reaction to legislation and so forth and so forth. So sounds like a good plan to me. I think we've covered all the items on the agenda. So we're now, it's relevant to entertain a motion to adjourn.
Just before we do, Bill, I would just say there's some questions going on about the report being available to review. And as secretary, I'll be happy to move it as soon as the commissioners have it to the Google Drive. So members of the public will be able to see what we have and be able to come to the meeting with any inputs on the 29th. So I think that should be if it's okay with the chairman, satisfactory process to enable us to get the input in an efficient way.
Yes.
Okay. Great.
Any other comments or questions before we talk about adjourning? All right, so it is 7:57. We're going to adjourn 3 minutes early. So we have a motion to adjourn. Do we have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Okay. Any objection? Hearing no objection, we are unanimous. We are adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, Bill.
18th meeting of the Citizens Commission. We're making, I think, good progress, and we appreciate everyone's input and advice. We're doing the best we can, and hope you enjoy the next couple of weeks and look forward to working with you. So, good night, everybody.
Thank you, Bill.
Good night.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye now.
Bye, Boba.
Night.